Our mission. Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. However, these Zoom meetings are helpful to parents all around the world, and they are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members who are not able to attend this meeting live can also watch. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Bill. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for being here. And I'll just do a really short introduction so that people know a little bit more about you. Bill and Judy Guggenheim have been conducting intensive after-death communication ADC research since 1988. Bill serves on the board of advisors of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. He is a member of the Association for Death Education and Counseling and several other organizations that minister to the needs of the terminally ill and the bereaved. Bill and Judy have presented workshops and sharing sessions at national and regional conferences of the Compassionate Friends, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the Association for Death Education and Counseling, In Loving Memory, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, Bereaved Parents of the USA, Parents of Murdered Children, other support groups for the bereaved, hospices, churches, and a wide variety of similar institutions that are devoted to personal and spiritual growth. Bill and Judy and their ADC research have been featured on television and radio programs and in numerous newspaper and magazine articles throughout the United States and Canada. They have 3 sons and were married for 17 years before divorcing. They live separate personal lives in Central Florida and continue to work together for the ADC project. So I just want to quickly say that Bill is going to be publishing a second book very soon, and we're very excited about it, entitled Stories from Heaven. But before that, I would love for Bill to explain a little bit about after-death communication. Could you tell us a little bit about it and what it is?
All right.
Welcome, Bill, by the way.
Basically, I was attending a 5-day workshop back in 1977 with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross called Life, Death, and Transition Workshop. And toward the end of it, a woman stood up, and she was from Peoria, Illinois, and was an RN, and her daughter had been hit and killed by a car while she was out walking. And the woman then narrated a very beautiful account of her meeting her daughter during a sweepstate experience and seeing her daughter swinging from in a tree, and how real it was and how vibrant and how much it helped her, and the conversation they had back and forth was quite lengthy. And I had never heard of anything like this before in my entire lifetime. And however, at that point, I didn't believe in anything to do with life after death. I was 35, 36 years old, and I just blew it off, because then she went on to say how her son, who had been doing his homework, looked up and he saw his sister, who had died, standing there looking at him. And he described what she was wearing and the color of the dress and the buttons of this, that, and the other. And then he came screaming out into the living room where his parents were watching TV. "Kathy's in my room, Kathy's in my room." And he was like he had literally seen a ghost or something. And he was scared more than anything. And so I put these two together. I first saw a bereaved mother having a beautiful experience. I'm happy for her, but I didn't believe it was real. And with a teenage boy, I figured, well, let's see, what kind of drug? Marijuana does that, this does that, blah, blah, blah. It was probably doing something. So I blew it away. But then Elizabeth herself went on and told a very long account that she had with a patient who had died 10 months earlier. And it was very evidential and it had been published and everything. So I came home and I wanted to learn more about these, but there were no books on it. I'd find a book with one experience here or two or three there, but nobody had ever named them. Nobody had ever studied them. And I thought somebody should do that. I tried to get Raymond Moody to do it. He had written the first book on near-death experiences. And he was called, not then, but later on, the father of near-death experience research. And I'd gotten to know him through a mutual friend. And while Raymond never said yes, he never said no, and it took 2 years. And in between there, different things happened. And one of which was hearing a voice say to me, do your own research, write your own book. It's your spiritual work to do. That was in 1988. And I'm not 100% sure if that was my father who had died when I was a little boy, 8 years old. Now I'm an only child, or whether that was a spirit guide or a guardian angel or something else. But I learned to trust it because it saved my youngest son from drowning on a previous occasion. So I went to Judy. We had been divorced 4 years. And I said, let's research this field. We didn't know if we'd find 50 people in the whole country. How do you find them? This was 1988. And at that point, you know, the internet didn't exist. None of these toys were around. But we did find people and they networked for us. We connected with the Compassionate Friends, which was the #1 support system for bereaved parents at that time. They helped us. And we interviewed 500 people the first year and kept on going. And we presented our first workshops at a conference that was that next year, 1989, it was over in Tampa. And we just kept going. And I've been presenting workshops for 33 years, most in person, but more recently, of course, by this method, by Zoom, from my own home, which is easier in many ways, of course, in traveling and going to hotels and all that. But it's not as personal. I like mixing with the people more than just seeing people on TV. So that's my background up to doing my second book, if you want to hear about that.
Well, I would love to hear about your second book, but before that, I would love to hear a little bit. First of all, I want to say that I have heard Bill speak at different conferences. He's amazing. And just before before COVID hit, he presented to a conference, I believe it was in Orlando, where there was standing room only. So that was for the Compassionate Friends.
Yes.
And people were
Actually, that wasn't unique. I've had several that were sending room only. And Elizabeth came to one of ours. And because she came, and it was ADEC, Association for Death Education and Counseling, who you were in terms of credentials counted for everything. Because she came, they gave us a small room. They were flowing out into the hallway, trying to hear whatever it is that she came to hear. So
well,
I'm used to that.
I am sure that she had standing room only as well. But I was wondering about this book. First of all, I would love to hear a little bit more. You were an agnostic before you started getting these messages. And maybe you can tell a little bit about the way that you were before.
Okay,
And then
well,
in 1974, you started getting these messages. Could you tell people a
sure.
little bit about
Okay.
that?
Basically, I was just a normal kind of guy, I think. I grew up in New York City, attended Yale University, attended the New York Institute of Finance, because frankly, I inherited money when I was 21, but I didn't know how to manage it. So I went there to attend every course they had. I worked for 2 different brokerage houses on Wall Street, 2 small ones, and things like that. And then I began doing volunteer work. I won't go through it all, but different kinds that help people. Most of all, I enjoyed being a volunteer fireman for 3.5 years. And then we moved to Florida. And on May 12th, 1974, I had been up all night, which wasn't that unusual, but all of a sudden it's about 5 a.m. I got directions to get a pen and a pad, a legal size pad of paper. And I did, and I wrote what seemed to be like for an hour and a half to 2 hours, a story. But I didn't know if it made sense. I didn't know if I was writing English. I didn't hear words, but I received thoughts in my brain. That's called telepathy. And it was just a steady stream of words. And then they were very fast as well. So I had to write as quickly as I could. And at 7 a.m., I woke Judy up and I held the pages up. I stapled them together and held them up by the corner and said to her very spiritually, "What the hell is this?" She looked at me and said later that I looked action, but she read the story, she understood it. And it was frankly, the name was Transition, and it was the story was of a man, and I didn't know this then, but later on I figured it out, of a man who had died during the night, but he didn't know it. He was not aware he had died physically, and he had no spiritual beliefs. And he did see a bright light, but that terrified him to go toward the light that you hear about in near-death experiences. He saw the sun and he saw this other light, but it does have a happy ending. He is comforted at the end. And that was the beginning of receiving all kinds of spiritual short stories, actually 54 of them, some other writings, also a lot of spiritual guidance, spiritual philosophy, some bad poetry, and most of all, writings that were messages from people who had died to people who were living. So I was functioning as a medium. But I had no belief in this. I had no desire to do this. It wasn't something I wanted or sought in any way. And I got rid of that part of it. I stopped doing that. But I did deliver the messages, and nobody said it was baloney. Everybody thanked me. And they were for people who were not with me. Nobody was asking me for them. I was alone in a room sitting in Florida, getting a message for somebody in Arizona or California or New York or someplace else, and then having to call them and say, "Would you like this message?" And everybody said yes. And then I'd call them again, and we discussed it after a few weeks later. But these spiritual short stories are what I'm going to self-publish in a book called Stories from Heaven. These are very, I think, nice stories, certainly a wide variety. Many are spiritual, blah, blah, blah. I won't go through it all, and I call it spiritual short stories and other writings, and received by Bill Guggenheim, and a prequel to the book, Hello from Heaven. That's the book, our book. That's the one I'm really proud of. The other is just finishing up something I did many years ago, and I'd like to share it. That's all. It's not expected to be a bestseller or anything like that.
That's amazing. But so tell me, have you gotten back in touch with these people who you delivered messages to years and years ago? This was in 1974.
That's a long time ago. That's 47 years ago. Many are deceased.
Okay, so have you heard anything from any of them?
No, not really. No.
Were they life-changing kind of messages?
Not-
Or just letting
I'll give you two different references. One was my first wife, Gay. Gay was a very, very intelligent, very intellectual woman who was a voracious reader. We were married 4.5 years and had 2 daughters. And we had been divorced a number of years before this happened. And a lot of the writings were from her own father for her, as well as messages for her. And as she said, "Bill, if you had been off in India studying in the cave, if you had a guru relationship with somebody, if you had been into, these other religions and things like that for 10 years, I might believe you. But anyway, send everything you have." So she never made a definitive statement about it at all.
That's so interesting. Well, Sherry is asking, was there something that happened that made you believe it was spiritual versus just your own thoughts, especially if you did not believe before? So could you
No,
maybe...
when I was in grade school, we used to have something called composition day, where we had to write a 1-page or more paper about anything we wanted. I frequently turned in a blank page. I had nothing to think about, to write about. I just didn't work that way. And I never knew what to say. And I was considered to be non-creative. So I was told when I went to Yale, major in engineering or science, but not liberal arts. So I was as far away from that as possible. I'd never written anything creative. I wrote a story once about UFOs, but it wasn't a story, it was a report. I was very good at reports, but not stories. Nothing creative that way, as far as I was concerned.
So this is the reason that you were sure that these things that you were getting were from someone else and not from you.
Oh, definitely. There were topics I didn't know anything about and ways I never thought of before. And just a whole different way of seeing things and understanding things that were totally foreign for me. Different values, different everything.
That's really interesting. So tell me a little bit, in March of 1980, you had one of those, initially, I know that you thought it was your father, but it was a voice that told you something.
A voice. Okay, we had three sons, and the two older boys who were closer in age would use the backyard that had a screened-in swimming pool, and there was a fence door in it. They'd use that as a shortcut. And you had in Florida, you have to have a fence around the swimming pool, and we did have one, and that was a safety feature. However, on one Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in the living room with Judy. We were having a conversation, and we finished the conversation. Whatever was over. We each started to go separate ways, and I heard a voice in my head say, "Go outside and check the swimming pool." Now notice how low key it is. Just check the swimming pool. I did. I went to the back door. I had sliding glass doors. I looked, and I saw that the fence door or gate was ajar. So I went out to just secure it. And in doing so, I looked down at the deep end of the pool, and our youngest son, John, Jon, was less than 2 years old. He was floating in the water, not near the side of it, in the middle of the deep end, and not moving. So I took one look, and then I just took off. I screeched Judy's name out as I ran down the side of the pool. And I saw, just before I jumped in the water, I saw him full faces. His eyes were wide open. He had a small smile on his lips, and he was about 1 inch under the water. I didn't know if he was dead or alive. There was no way to know. And for some reason, I took my shoes off. I had some training, take your shoes off if you go into a pool. So I just slipped them off. And I went in, pushed him to the side. Judy heard me. She came running out and pulled him out by the wrist. And all this happened so fast. He spit up some water. I was cold. The water was cold. But he didn't even require CPR. He was fine. And he got up and walked away. And that literally saved his life because he was under the water and have no idea how long that had happened. And the purpose of this story is not what happened to me so much. I want your other people to all know this. If you ever hear a voice say while you're driving, stop, or slow down, or do this or do that, or in any other case, look out at the barn, look, do this, do that. It seems out of place. Do it. It may save somebody's life, certainly a bad accident, or who knows what, because we have a whole chapter of people whose lives were protected or saved in Hello from Heaven.
Yes, definitely. And that inner voice or our spirit guides or your dad, as you initially thought it was, is definitely something that we should be listening to. And so that's an amazing story and it's absolutely beautiful. But I have questions here. Gina is asking, I would like to know if you still work with spirit. What are your beliefs now about heaven and transitioning to the other side and consciousness continuing on?
I don't just believe it, I know it. After all these years, 47 years, I don't just believe in an afterlife, I know there's one. And I've known some things about it the researchers haven't even reported. And I'll tell you what they are even. Number one, there are no shadows in heaven. You don't have an overhead sun. Everything gives off its own light. The trees, the bushes, the flowers, the grass, the buildings, everything radiates light. It's radiant light. The people, no shadows. That's one of them. What's the other one? I have trouble remembering sometimes. I'm sorry, that's just the only one I can recall at the moment, but there's another thing.
Absolutely beautiful. I love that. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting because yesterday I posted something about what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had said about the fact that being able to create your own light, it's like a stained glass window, being able to shine from the outside in or shine from the inside out. And we call ourselves shining light parents because we feel that our kids shine through us.
Through us, yes.
So the idea of having no shadows is really a beautiful idea for all of us, I'm sure. Karen is asking a question about suicide. What is your view about the afterlife for those who transition by suicide?
What you haven't mentioned is I had a daughter named Janet. I have a daughter who was 47 who ended her physical life with suicide. This is where I get a little bit political because I'm angry at the state of New Mexico because she was able to walk into a Walmart and buy a handgun, a 38, with no waiting period and no background check. And either one, a waiting period of a week, perhaps would have made a difference. And with a background check, they would have seen she had a longer history of psychiatric and psychological care than 10 average children do. She had a very long one, but she was able to buy the gun and use it 2 hours later. So I've heard from her since then. She is happier. She is freer. She put it, if you have a physical disability, people can see that. If you have an emotional illness, people can't see that. And so they don't accept you with that. They don't know about that. And all kinds of wacky things, painful things can happen. But she claims that she had an emotional illness, which I believe. All her life she had emotional problems. And I prefer the word emotional to mental because that sounds so cerebral, whereas emotions are what you feel. And
that is Heidi, who's coming in to say hi. So Bill has a very new puppy and she is half poodle and half schnauzer. And we are so excited to be able, maybe you can lift her up and show everybody what she looks like just so that
the other end of the room trying to get out.
Oh, she's not, okay. Don't worry. That's fine.
Just open the door.
Everybody loves dogs. So. But anyway,
anyway, with suicide, there are so many different motivations for it. That's number one. One of them is pain. Some people, like my daughter, are in so much emotional pain that anything is better than living with that. You just can't live with it any longer. We know what physical pain feels like. Well, just multiply it and make it never ending. And that's what emotional pain is. Now, there are many other reasons for doing it as well. And I'm not going to judge anybody or their child or whoever it may be, spouse. And I don't believe that there's an eternal hell for all that or anything like that whatsoever, as the movies suggest, what dreams may come, et cetera, et cetera. But that it's just something to work through. And that people, I think, are born with that challenge. And some survive it and some don't survive with it. And it's just another learning experience.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that it's hard that New Mexico doesn't have better legislation, but at the same time, I would assume that you realized that that was just an exit point and it would have happened. If it hadn't happened that way, it would have happened a different way. Do you
Oh yeah, she had attempted it two or three times before.
So the fact that it happened at that time doesn't really matter.
I'm not angry at New Mexico. I can't change New Mexico.
But Sherry is asking, and I think this is a good question. Could you ask him? So I'm asking you, what has helped you the most through the grieving process after your daughter transitioned? What do you think are the best tools for something?
No, I had already been very, very advanced along with this work. In other words, she did this in 2011. We began our work in 1988. So not only was Hello from Heaven out in 1995, but another 15 years went by. And so I was very my beliefs about life after death were very much in place. And I've seen her, I've spoken with her. I've heard from her several times, but I've seen and spoken with her once, two-way conversation in a vision, sitting in front of a computer. Her favorite song was here. The song I associated with her is "Here Comes the Sun," and I played it, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I could see her right in front of me. She was dancing in like a pirouette in a circle, and then in a big circle outside that, and explained to me how she was working with children and things of that nature. So I had a lot of contact with her, fortunately.
So, it's so interesting because the first time that I was supposed to hear you speak was at a conference for Terry Daniels, and you had already sent the books. So the books were already there,
Yeah.
Hello from Heaven. And that was when Janet transitioned. And so you weren't able to come to the conference, but we were able to enjoy your books. And obviously it was incredibly impactful for us to have that happen at that conference. So anyway, that was my first contact with you.
Yeah.
And
Well, no, we met in person before that.
oh, before that, that's true. We had already met at a conference before that.
With
Year before. It was the year before with Terry as well.
and it was Ann and her year. We met through their conference.
Exactly. But I just feel so grateful that you already knew this, and I knew that you already knew this, and that you were able to move forward and heal probably a lot quicker because you already knew that Janet was in a good place. Sherry is asking, and I think this is an interesting question. You were talking about what heaven is like, that there are no shadows. Have you visited heaven, or how is it that you know the information?
I don't know how I know, and I'm trying to think of the other thing I know about heaven. It hasn't been published. No shadows. I say that, yeah. No, never gives off until night. There's something else I know too, and I'm going to beat myself up later, but I'll think of it then. But I can't explain all the things I know. Some things have just come, maybe through meditation, somehow, some way.
So, are you a big meditator? Do you do a lot of? No, just. What is it that allows you to connect the best? So just being able to.
When I focus on other people who are bereaved is what does it for me, because I'm concerned for them, and I don't want to say anything inadvertently even that says something wrong. I recently on Facebook, I was trying to help a woman who had a near-death experience very, very recently, and she was constantly on Facebook and asking questions and getting negative feedback and everything. I was trying to help her, but she misunderstood something I said and blew me off too. So that kind of upset me. I didn't handle it better. I make mistakes too, yes.
Well, and you also have helped so many people. Do you, in terms of Hello from Heaven, how many languages has that book been published in?
I think it was about 18.
18 different languages.
I can't read them all, so I can't tell you where they're from or what they are.
So people all over the world are reading this and learning about after death communication, which is just.
I'd like to say yes, but to be in all honesty, foreign print orders are not very large. Remember, we have a population of over 330 million people. The countries of Europe and the other ones, number one, they have much smaller populations. They have much smaller number of people with money to buy books with. So they don't, a print order of 2,000 copies is a big order. Our book is done the best in Germany. Year after year after year, we still get royalties, but that's the only one.
Well, that's very interesting that it's in Germany. And I think we need a Helping Parents Heal in Germany then, because obviously there are people who are interested in the afterlife, which is really interesting. I have another question asking about your take on soul contracts or life plans before we come here. Do you have
You really want it?
Yes, we do. We want to hear.
Whoever asked this question, you may hear a longer answer. I believe it's like this. I think that what life is like is a theater company. And when I was a teenage boy, we went to a place in Massachusetts, Stockbridge, Massachusetts, that had a repertory theater company. So every week they had a different play, some just a few people, some would say all 30 people, depending on the size of the play. When they have a few of the others are rehearsing for next week. And I think that life is like that. I think that we as a group, from great grandparent to great grandchild, and through that age range, which is roughly 100 years, we come up with a group plan that's beneficial to all of us. In some cases, some more so than others. I'm here, I'll go through this in order to help you, and next time you'll do something to help me. But for our mutual growth, we choose to incarnate at different points. I'll be the grandparent, you be the parent, you be the child, you be the grandchild, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes time. And we'll choose race and gender and age groups and ethnic groups and countries, and what type of poverty or wealth we'll be born into, education, all the criteria that a human being has. And that's what we all choose together as a group to incarnate as, in order to learn life lessons for everybody's benefit. And then we finish up, we go back, and when we're ready, we'll choose with another group. Supposedly, according to one book, we all belong to different soul families. And actually, if we don't walk around like looking like people, we even give up these bodies. We need this body for this planet, for this type of lifestyle. Who knows about another planet? I have no idea. But we appear as balls of colored light to each other. And this is in the books of what's his name, Michael Newton, and where's it here? I'm trying to find the Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. These two books, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. This does include reincarnation, but I believe in many incarnations, and not just in one planet. Think about how big the universe is. And then today, even on the radio, you talk about multiple universes. So I don't think it's all here just for us. I think we're just a small part of it.
That's beautiful. Yes, I don't want to interrupt you. I didn't mean to, but I think that that's a beautiful description. And we talk about our kids being home and we're still in school. So this each thing that we decide, every way that we decide to come back, we're learning something. And so so I just put in here Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. They're both incredible books by Michael Newton. And
other thing in quote, in heaven we communicate by telepathy, mind, thought, mind to mind, thought to thought, not with words. We don't need that.
Okay, so that's the no shadows and then no words either. Okay.
We have the words, but they're done by thought. We don't speak. It's not spoken.
So that
and there's no deception that way either, because whatever you're really feeling and thinking is what I pick up. You can't say this but mean that.
So I know that you have these thoughts that come to you. You had that in 1974 for quite a bit of time. This is what this new book is going to be about. Is it something that happens to you now as well? Do you get messages for other people the way
No. I have on occasion when I've needed to. I receive just a brief thought about something. When I'm helping somebody, I'll get an insight or something. I'm going to call it small. It's not a big change. But the most interesting one I got by when I was doing that way back when was a man whose grandparents had died in the snow. And what did that mean? How does anybody in the United States die in the snow? It was that his grandparents lived in Upper Michigan, and apparently during a snowstorm, one went outside, perhaps to get more firewood and to bring it back in. and got lost. And then the other one went out to find the first one, and she got lost. And they both were found dead outside in the snow later on. Now that was the most evidential thing I got.
Yeah, that obviously is, because it isn't something that you would normally think would be true.
No,
So
not at all.
that's pretty amazing. I was going to ask you, in terms of Hello from Heaven, could you tell us one of the most amazing after-death communications that you wrote about in that book?
I don't, there's so many, but the one that I talk about the most, because so many parents, unfortunately, I'm not criticizing anybody now or past or future, because I understand we've all been there. They automatically, they think I'll never see my child again. Okay, that's just, I've lost my child forever. They use the word forever so often, so easily. And it seems like an eternal abyss that they'll never cross. And the story I like is a very simple one, where a woman goes to her minister and talks to him about her daughter who died. And her question to him is, why did God take my child? And she's very sure God took her child. In other words, why didn't God protect my child? Is what she's really asking. But the way she worded it, why did God take my child? And she went on and on and on. It was understandably with a lot of emotion, anger, bitterness, hurt, and other things I can't guess. And after listening to her, he finally says, whatever her name is, we'll say Catherine, God didn't take your child, he received her. That's a whole flip of how to see it.
It's beautiful. Yes.
Flip.
Completely different than taking.
For a newly bereaved parent, I think it's a whole flip.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's beautiful. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about your relationship with Dr. Moody, with Dr. Raymond Moody, and the fact that you did have such a hard time in the very beginning. Obviously, he, as you say, is the father of near-death communication. You're the father of after-death communication. Could you talk a little bit about that, what happened there? Because you did explain that last time. For people who don't understand, you really were working hard for many years to be able to get this book done and to talk about after communication.
It was very simple. I don't have an MD or a PhD after my name. And so I thought I could write it, but who in the world would publish it? Okay. And as it turned out, I found a literary agent who said, I won't represent you, but if you go sell 10,000 copies of your own book, then come see me, because then I'll have some buzz to sell it with. 10,000 copies. Now, when our book, Hello from Heaven, our self-published version, we had 5,000 copies printed. We sent out advertising about it to 7,000 different people and organizations. We sold 1,000 copies the first week, the first month, and 1,000 the next 31 days, etc. And pretty soon she bought it. She liked it, but she wouldn't represent it. And what happened was the editor said to her, well, you're working on this and this, what else do you have? And she reached into her backpack and pulled our book out, which was a manuscript. I mean, different looking than this. And they kissed, oh, let me see that. Long story short, 4 different editors wanted to see our book, or had to asked to see it, and the 4th one she had to give it to, because that one she works with all of them equally. And then there was a big bidding war for the book that she never even tried to sell. So that's how that came about.
That's amazing.
And so with Raymond Moody, I didn't, I could have written a book, but how would I get it published was the concern. I didn't think of it selling itself at that point. And Raymond's a very wonderful person. When I first saw him, he was on TV with near-death experiences. I'm not sure what year, I know the first one he heard was of a man who lived in, I can't remember his name at the moment. I'm trying to find it very quickly. George Ritchie. And he met George Ritchie when he was at the University of Virginia. George Ritchie had his near-death experience during World War II when he was in basic training in Texas. And so George initiated Raymond into NDE, the first one Raymond ever heard. Then Raymond was a teacher at the University of Virginia, and he had a student, and the student said, Dr. Moody, could I have a few minutes of your time? Okay, they got together, and he said, why don't you ever talk about the afterlife? And Raymond looked at him and like, he could have said something very obscene, but he didn't. I mean, went to the afterlife, and Raymond's answer was, who would want to know about that? Meaning there is none. It doesn't exist. Why would I talk about that? It's ridiculous. But he began collecting near-death accounts. And he wrote his book, Life After Life, before he was a medical doctor, actually. And that little book, there was only 5,000 copies made, was printed in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, by Mockingbird Books, unknown publisher, in other words, and that was expected to die there. But nevertheless, those 5,000 sold out. Bantam Books bought the rights and went to New York and became 16 million copies more later. But Raymond is a very humorous person. He would go on TV shows like Merv Griffith, who some of your viewers may know, and he would bring on somebody who had a major near-death experience. And Raymond would let the person speak, but Raymond was sort of like a country farm boy. He would say, well, I just don't know about that. This sure is different. It requires a lot of thinking here. Yeah, we got to think about this. We got to do a lot more research about this. And by golly, it's something something different, isn't it? And things like this, very disarming. And people would buy into that very easily. And he got more and more accounts and more people and books and everything from that. But it was the first book that sold really big.
Well, it's amazing.
Because he loves research. He loves to do research of ancient Rome and Greece, not modern day stuff.
No, I know he talks a lot about Plato, about Socrates, and it's fascinating because all of these things that he talks about actually were experienced by those great thinkers back then, which is an interesting thing for everyone to understand, that this is not new to think about after death communication as well as death experiences. This is something that's been around forever. But also, I just want to say that book, Life After Life, for me was pretty amazing because it was the first book that I read after Morgan transitioned, but also even more than that, my mother-in-law experienced a near-death experience in 1975 when she was in Africa. She went through the windshield of her car, and this was in 1975. And she experienced going through the tunnel, as he talks about in so many of these accounts, and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and being told that it wasn't her time and to come back. And she talked about it in the hospital in Africa. She talked about it to her friends and family. Everybody thought she was crazy. Right at that same time, his book was translated into French, as I'm sure your book has also been translated into French. And it saved her life because she realized she wasn't the only person who experienced that kind of thing. So it really is a huge thing that he was able to publish these near-death experiences. And as you say, he's very down home, very endearing when he's speaking. He has multiple degrees. He's a PhD, he's a medical doctor, he's got all different kinds of degrees. And he didn't believe in this in the beginning, the same way that you didn't believe in this.
No.
It wasn't something that was even on his radar. It was something that just happened. And it's fascinating to me to think that both of you did change your way of thinking. It wasn't something that you were ever wanting to do or expecting to do, but it just happened that way. I have someone, Renata is saying, I agree with Bill. I was angry with God for some time after my son Ryan died. Then I came to realize that God saved him from some terrible suffering here, be it physical, emotional, job, kids, illness, simply some terrible suffering that was coming, and instead he was lifted to heaven. I used to pray every day for God to keep my son safe, and he did, just in a different way than what was meant. What I meant. I don't know where those thoughts came from, but they brought me a sense of peace. So I think she's talking about Janet, and the fact that you know now that she's having a blast where she is, happy, healthy, and whole. Irene is asking, have you read Proof of Heaven by Dr. Abin Alexander?
I call him little bro. He calls me big bro. We know each other that well. I helped edit his book 3 times. Yes, I know Proof of Heaven. I know Evan.
It was the first book that she read after Carly transitioned.
Right.
So it talks about his near-death experience. So his near-death experience is a little different from a lot of other near-death experiences that Dr. Raymond Moody speaks about. What do you think about that?
Here on Facebook, there's a near-death experience group, and stuff is all over the map. But I'd like to give you your people some very good sites if they're not familiar with them. One is IANDS, IANDS.org. That's the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS.org. And that was founded in 1981, 40 years ago. Raymond was one of the founders. I know the others, most of the others, etc. Another one, if you want to read some very good accounts, there are a couple of places. One is NEAR, NEAR hyphen death, DEATH.com, neardeath.com. And that's done by Kevin Williams. And his are all categorized by what different religions and different this and different that. You can find all kinds of accounts on there. Many, 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 many. Another one is nhne.org. nhne.org. And that used to stand for New Heaven, New Earth. And that's different now. But that's what's his name? Son, I can't find the name here.
You must have a visitor, Bill. It sounds like somebody's at your front door. Do you think that somebody's come to see you? Heidi,
No, that's just my dog barking at somebody in the back door. Anyway, it's but I would suggest those 3 websites for near-death experiences. And no 2 people have one that's the same, and their beliefs change what they see, the way they interpret. Some very fundamentalist Christian will see it this way. Somebody who's a total opposite to that will see the same thing a different way. And it's personal. It's what they expect to see. Because let's face it, if you were a born-again Christian, you wouldn't want to wake up in a Buddhist heaven or a Hindu heaven or a Jewish heaven, et cetera, et cetera. Vice versa. One of those people wouldn't want to wake up in a Christian heaven. So they're all different dimensions, so to speak, levels, areas, districts, who knows what you could call them, for different belief systems to work through. Because I think all those are really like denominations of what I call spirituality. But for those who are really into it, like my belief system is the one, the truth. Well, that's different. I'm not trying to change anybody. I'm just saying that's what your experience will be like. I've read one that was by a woman who was Muslim. She had deities and things in there I'd never heard of. And it was very, very different than the rest of the ones I read. One of the ones I recommend is a very easy one. The first one was Return from Tomorrow Return from Tomorrow by George Ritchie, R-I-T, C-H-I-E, M-D. Return from Tomorrow, George Ritchie. This was the man who died almost, but not quite, in World War II. Another very good one is Embraced by the Light by Betty Eadie, E-A-D-I-E. That was a huge bestseller, etc. Those are both very Christian books, by the way. Dying to be Me is well known, I'm sure, to your audience, by Anita Moorjani. And you probably read To Heaven and Back by Mary C. Neal, MD, by a medical doctor who almost drowned while she was kayaking in South America.
Yes, those are all wonderful books. As a matter of fact, let's see, To Heaven and Back by Dr. Mary Neal. Yeah. So Dr. Mary Neal obviously is an orthopedic surgeon. So she's similar to Dr. Evan Alexander as well.
He was a neurosurgeon.
Well, I'm just saying that she's a medical doctor as
Oh, yeah,
well.
yeah.
Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, who experienced a lot of these things as a medical doctor in the emergency room. He was seeing a lot of people appearing to him. Let's see, To Heaven and Back. I'm just trying to quickly write. But it is wonderful to be able to hear all of these different accounts. And I agree with you that it's fascinating to know that some people see Jesus, some people see Buddha, some people see other deities. It just depends on what your belief system is. And it certainly is reassuring.
Well, I'm working indirectly with a young girl who had an NDE at age 5. And only there were other family members, her mother, her father, her uncle, her aunt, and I think a cousin. They were taken up by a tornado in Arab, Alabama. And they were taken up, and then they went up a flight of stairs with angels, and she saw heaven's gates, very Christian, heaven's gates. And she saw the baby was handed by the parents to Jesus. And her father he was bald. He had a certain medical problem, alopecia. I don't know what that is. He was, and she saw him with hair for the first time. And he didn't wear glasses for the first time. And he went into heaven, and her mother did too. And she was just about to graduate as a nurse. She was a student about to graduate as a grown student going back to school. And these other two people and whatnot. And but she was sent back, and one other child was sent back, and accompanied by angels. And they wrote a little book about it. But now I found an author for them who has written a real book, and I can't wait for it to come out.
So
I don't know the title yet.
This is our tornado that took the whole family up. Is that right?
7 people.
That's amazing. How exciting. Yeah, I think that that'll be fascinating when that comes out.
Yes.
And I just want to say how excited I am that you do have Heidi, because I know the last time that we spoke, your puppy had just passed away and you were planning not to get another dog. So this is very exciting to hear her barking. And again, I have 5 dogs myself, so I love hearing that barking. Let's see. Nancy is saying, I once heard the analogy that spirituality is like an underground river, and specific faiths are all like wells drilled down into the ground to reach the river. Doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get to the river. That just gave me chills. That's beautiful. I think that that's such a great analogy.
As long as there's love behind it, because don't forget those same people drilling down were killing each other in wars. And have been doing that throughout mankind's history. Muslims and Christians have been doing it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree. And I think that the most important thing that we learn from having a child transition is that this journey here on earth is all about love, and that we need to love each other. We need to help each other. We need to be offering a hand back to each other to be able to help each other forward. But we only have about 4 more minutes. So I would love to have you just give us some words of wisdom, Bill, and tell us a little bit more possibly about your new book that's going to be coming out, that of course we're going to have you on here to talk about once you are able to.
Whoops, I hadn't prepared anything mentally. I don't really have anything more to say about the book. It'll have the 54 spiritual short stories and the 2 longer writings, and then some other. I asked, so can I still receive stories? And I received 4 more. That's kind of a secret, but they were in the book. And I received them this year, or maybe it was last year, the end of last year, whatever. And just to see if I could. And then I have some other things I've written myself, just a few things. So it's stories from heaven. And it's mainly hello from heaven that I want people to have, because what I've seen over and over again, I just saw it today from a woman, that many people keep a copy of this book right next to their bed, and they read 1 or 2 stories a night, that's all, before going to sleep. It's not about assimilating it intellectually, but rather just letting it heal you emotionally. And it has 353 firsthand accounts are in the book. So that's a lot of stories. And
353, yes.
353. And that's what I'm very proud of. And these are everybody else's stories and not mine. And I'm just happy this many years later to be talking about it, 33 years later. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to share with people.
Thank
Not
you.
because I did it, but because people, everything that could have gone right went right to help this book become published. Amazing stories.
That's wonderful. And it's wonderful that you heard that this was something that you were supposed to do, and you did it, and you followed what you were supposed to do, and it's helped so many people. We have people saying, Bill, thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for speaking to us, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Let's see. So we have one person asking if the book is about NDEs or communication with spirits. It's actually after death communication. So it's about communication with our loved ones who have transitioned, meaning our children or whoever else it is who has transitioned before us.
It's a direct communication. It's not through mediums or psychics or devices. It's direct, spontaneous communication.
So we have people saying, ordering the book, hello from heaven. Heidi saying, thank you very much. I have the book beside my bed. This is Anne who's saying that. Thank you, Bill, Elizabeth, and Irene. Anna is saying, Gina's saying, thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Oh, Sherry is asking if you do readings. So do you do readings? This information that you get, you share with everyone, but you do it through publications of books, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you. Let's see. And so I just want to let you know that at the end of these meetings, we always ask people to unmute themselves and say thank you and goodbye. Thank you all for being here. Please come back to see us with Mark Anthony tomorrow. And thank you, Bill, for your wonderful wisdom and spending time with us, as well as Heidi. So let's go ahead and let people say thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Muchísimas
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.